We're on air.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the work session for February 17th. No,
March 1st.
Yeah, I'm looking at the wrong piece of paper. Sorry. There we go, March 1st. Our first item is the Milwaukie Station Food Cart Pod. It'll be kicked off by our development director, Joseph Riddell, and followed up by the person who operates said pod. Great, Johnson. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Happy to be the first in-person speaker in 2 years. Tonight, we're going to bring forward just a quick update on the food cart pod in South Downtown. I'll let Richard speak more to the overview of the last year, but I think just two items that are worth mentioning from a city perspective. One is that we assisted with the purchase and building of a canopy, or the covering that you now see if you've been down there recently within the last 6 months or so. Creates a much better customer experience, especially for winter months, but also even the sunny, hot summer days ahead. And the second is we just inked a 3-year lease extension, and the city has typically done 1-year leases, extensions, I should say. That was primarily because this has been kind of a temporary project of sorts. We've run into some issues recently, and Richard will again speak to some of those, in that some improvements and costs are going to be incurred, and that in order to amortize that, as well as have some assurance over the next couple of years, not only for Richard, but also the vendors for building out business plans, they need a little bit longer of a commitment. So that's why I went that direction. With that, I'll let Richard kind of speak to the report and answer any questions.
Thanks, Joseph. Mayor, Councilman. I guess the best news about the food cart pod for the last couple of years is that we've survived. We're still open. So, it was challenging, especially, 2020 was really touch and go, with the mandate to cease serving any kind of sit-down meals or anything. Some of the carts, I think, had 3 carts that stayed open to try to serve takeout, which proved challenging because we had to maintain some services like garbage and toilets and stuff for them, but everybody else, closed down. So we basically reduced the rents down to, cost to just help everyone survive. And we were able to make it through that period. So that was definitely the low point. So this last year was a little bit more normal, but, we have experienced some COVID-related types of impacts. We had actually a record number of carts last summer in the pod, and then 2 of them closed shortly after opening. I think one was open only 1 day, and one was open in a short time, and that was because their business model was based on having employees work in the carts, and they could not find employees to work in the carts. So most of the food carts that we have are owner-operated, or they might bring in some employees to work with them, but the owners are mostly involved. Where these other 2 were going to be mostly, employee-ran. So, that was disappointing that we lost those for that reason. We've got 1 empty space, possibly 2. We have a space over by the bathrooms that's not the premier space, but we've had carts in there before. There is an entrance there, so we get traffic there. So we just have 1 space available right now. And I've had some interest, but it's hard to fill the last space in the food cart pod because we have a policy of non-compete for menus and cuisines. So, the last one's got to be something different than everything else we already have. So we've had some interest in it, but, it's been overlapping. Somebody's already doing that. So that's been a problem. But aside from the labor shortages, we've had an increase in homelessness and homeless impact. We're using our toilets a little more frequently than they were before, including for spending the night in. So we have 2 portable toilets that we had open. Originally, we had them set up so that we could lock them at night so they'd be secure, so they wouldn't get overused or trashed. And what we found was that the homeless or people would come into the pod at night, and if the toilets were locked, they'd either try to break in or they would just go somewhere else in the pod. So it was almost a lesser of the evils to just leave them open so that they could at least, confine it to that, the facilities there. But then lately, which had never happened before, we have, people that are spending the night in there. Servicers come in the morning and they can't get in there because there's people in there and they won't come out. So, it's happened, a few times. I don't know if it's happening every morning, but frequently. And so we had 2 toilets that were just open, both for the vendors, the people that operate the carts, and for the public. And so what we did was we got another toilet from our service provider that has a coded entry, and we reserved that for the people that work there that don't really have any other options because they were finding toilets that were basically unusable, and like I said, they had no other options. So far that's worked out better, preserving one that stays in a clean and usable state at all times. As Joseph mentioned, the other really good news for us this last year was the that new canopy structure that we have, which is super. It's much bigger. We had 2 of those fabric covered canopies before that were each 10 by 20, and this new one is 20 by 35. So it's much bigger. Plus, it doesn't leak right in the middle like the other 2 were coming together, and it's snow and windproof, and just a much nicer, better structure. So as Joseph said, it's handy this time of year really for rain, but also in the summer too, because that's such an exposed area that it really helps with the shade. So we've got sides for it. I've just got one up right now because I was afraid to create like a camp environment in there, and we've got some kids that have been hanging out in there regularly, and I didn't want to make it their little clubhouse either. So I've got the one side on the windward side up so that the rain doesn't blow in on the tables. I've tried to prevent that, but we do have another side that we can put up. So that's a big improvement, and it's also structurally sound enough where we could conceivably put heat in the structure if that would be feasible. I guess the biggest challenge we have coming up near term is the sewer connection that we're going to be mandated to have by the Department of Environmental Quality. This is a rule that came into force a couple of years ago, and they were going to implement it at the beginning of last year. And I testified on that, our behalf that, this would be a huge impact for, our food cart pod, since it was already operating under the conditions where we have, you probably noticed the tanks that are around the food cart pod, the white tanks and the metal cages. Those are auxiliary tanks for their gray water that comes from their sink. And they have a small tank on the cart, and that only holds maybe a day's worth, roughly, depending on how much they use. So they use that auxiliary tank that holds about 250 gallons for excess, and then have it emptied, once a week. But the DEQ decided that if there's sewer available to tap into, that you have to use it. You can't use those tanks. So the start date for that, effective date for that, is January 1st, 2023. So I've talked to a couple contractors that are working on bids right now. It's a little bit challenging because now it's a working food cart pod with all the carts there, and now we have this new canopy, and there's excavation that has to be done. We have to put in ports that they can, dump their water into, typically with a garden hose from their other tank. And then it has to go through a grease interceptor and then into the sewer. So pretty major project, and I haven't got any definite quotes yet because there's still some questions that we're waiting to get answered about codes and other costs, but we're starting early. The plan would be to do that. The work, if it pencils out, we would do it probably next, late fall or early winter, to try to do it in the slowest period of the year for the customers, for the carts, to have as little financial impact as possible on them, and then have it organized so that it doesn't take long. We can get it done as fast as possible, but it'll be a very expensive project. So I will keep Joseph informed of what the actual bids are coming in at, so we can look at those.
Is the sewer line like at the sidewalk?
Yeah, it's in the street.
It's in the street.
Yeah, it's on because when we first built the food cart pod, there was no water line, there was no water, there was no sewer, there was no telephone cable, or there's no utilities. There was a conduit, luckily, to an underground vault that were able to use for the electricity that we needed. But there was no other, services there. So for the water, we had to bore under the street to the far side of the street and then run a water line. And the sewer line is on the near side of the street, so I guess that's good. But it is right in front of the pod, so it doesn't have to be brought down to the street there. So as part of that project, things that we could consider putting in some kind of plumb sink, because right now we have a hand-wash sink, but it's, one of those portable ones, and it's serviced by the toilet service companies that has the, refill with water. It has a tank with fresh and then, used water, and so that has to be changed. So it'd be nice to have that plumbed directly into that system, so we wouldn't have to have that kind of temporary tank, and then we could have, warm water. That would be good. And there's a possibility of, we could look at maybe doing plumbed toilets. These lines will be for gray water, where it's like a toilet produces black water, solids. So the gray water goes to a grease interceptor and separates the oils, fats, and grease so it doesn't clog up the sewer. So there'd have to be a separate line, but since everything's going to be excavated, it's something to consider. But it would have its own challenges in having, plumbed toilets in terms of, policing and maintaining those as well. So it's just maybe something to consider, but I don't know whether the pros or the cons win out on that. But like I mentioned before, with the new canopy structure, there's a possibility that we could put heat, and that's probably the vendor's number one request, that we have like a better winter type, seating area for customers. And on a day like today where it's mild, if you can be out of the rain, there'll be people there, but, it doesn't take much. And there's a lot of places around that have those infrared heaters, which just, go right over your table, and, they just take the edge off enough to where it makes it comfortable to sit there. So that's a possibility. We would have to either figure out how to bring power there, either electric or, propane to power them, but the structure would support those. So that's a good option, and probably, like I said, the number one request. Another thing that we've talked about, and I've talked to like the Downtown Neighborhood Association and Business Association about some things we might work out in common. And one of the items there is maybe some signage just to direct people and inform people that, there is a downtown Milwaukie, and, it's worth visiting, because if you go by McLaughlin or even T24, you might not even know that Milwaukie has a nice little downtown with shops, businesses, and everything. So ODOT is very controlling about, the roadways. We have that little orange sign, which is the biggest, the A-board sign. That's the biggest that the city would allow. And it's set back because it had to be out of the ODOT right of way, right? So if we could have some kind of signage, on both main thoroughfares that pointed out that Milwaukie had a downtown, for like a community information sign, like you see at exits and stuff, that, just kind of not maybe with any specific business, but to say, downtown, shops and restaurants and stuff, visit downtown Milwaukie kind of thing. Maybe even on the lamppost, like, the banners for the, farmers market and First Friday and something like that. Visit downtown Milwaukie. That would be helpful, because the food cart pod is rather hidden. Even from downtown, there's a little bit of a rise in that, elevation like that, so you can't really see it from downtown. You really have to be going by it, or it does get some visibility from the ridership of the TriMet riders, but some signage I think would really help. So. Like I said, we survived, and, hopefully we'll have a good, summer this year. The food carts kind of live and die with the weather. So if we could have a nice, summer, and, not a lot of wildfires and, good conditions, and we've got this good canopy and nice canopy, and, hopefully we can put COVID behind us. Masks will be coming on soon, and, hopefully we won't go back from that, and, we can start planning ahead. And as Joseph said, we have a little bit longer lease this time, so that allows us to consider some things. we do have the sewer project, which is going to be, very expensive. So, that remains to be seen whether that's even feasible or not. But, we appreciate the, cooperation that we've had since the beginning of the project with the city of Milwaukie and basically everybody that I've dealt with. Such a pleasure compared to other nearby jurisdictions that I've had to deal with. So, that's been great. So I'll leave it there. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
I did have a question, and it's maybe more of a question for staff, and I actually meant to ask ahead of the meeting, but one of the things that surprised me in your memo was the thing about the trash haulers. And I guess I'm not surprised you have a bad experience with waste management, but I guess I didn't think commercial users were tied to waste management. Is that the case? They have to use who's our official hauler? They can't contract for their own garbage?
Yeah, I'm not sure how City of Milwaukie is, but typically, the franchises cover commercial and residential. That's something.
They have wow, interesting. Oh yeah, you're right. Heiberg is like,
I know.
you can practically walk your trash.
I know. That's I talked to her recently, and just Jesse Heiberg, my food cart pod in Selwood, they provided garbage service for them. So I worked for her for many years, and I can call her and get her on the phone, without having to go through a menu or anything else. And usually there's no problem. I have no reason to call. So it's such a difference to dealing with waste management, but two different sized companies.
On the signage question, I did, we did have a wayfinding signage project, which, you see a little bit of it in downtown, like the phase was installed, but I'm pretty sure the original plan did call for trying to get some signage on at least McLaughlin. I don't know about 224. I know all that's hard because it does have to go through ODOT, but I'm definitely supportive of trying to do that.
Yeah, because that would benefit everybody downtown. So that's pretty
right.
And that is in the urban renewal area plan. There would be funding for both phase 2 of those signs and definitely for the banners to be replaced on McLaughlin, just like you were mentioning.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of getting to the point in the project where that money is cutting out and those works get done. I don't remember if we specifically discussed the little ODOT blue signs as part of that or not. We haven't discussed it, but I'm sure that would be something that we could fold in.
Be that terribly hard.
It involves ODOT.
Yeah, but Happy Valley got signs that say Happy Valley everywhere and pretty fast. I don't know how they did it, but they did it.
true. Maybe Joseph made it.
I think that's worth a conversation. I think that seems pretty doable.
Yeah.
You see the highway signs and they do list the restaurants at that exit.
Yeah, gas and restaurants and those stuff.
Can't help but think that's entirely possible. I have a curiosity about the porta potty use. Do you have any sense of how much the use is TriMet riders?
It's hard to tell. We have a lot of non-customer use. I know that. I need delivery people in the area, any people walking by, TriMet riders. There's a lot of it. I can't really quantify exactly where it comes from, but when I'm working down there, I can see people, I can see the usage. So it's pretty substantial.
Yeah, we have an interesting society now where public bathrooms are almost a thing of the past.
I know, yeah.
It's problematic.
Yeah, Nick Kristof had a column about it in the New York Times about, hey, everybody still has to go to the bathroom and there's no public, facilities anymore. And in Portland, they have those Portland loos in a couple places, and then they put up some, porta potties in different neighborhoods too because of the, homeless presence. So I don't know if that's a possibility, but it's a huge issue.
Our parks, NCPRD puts them at certain parks, and I often see Amazon drivers stopping at them, and lots of people who aren't necessarily
hopefully there'll be one across the street here in the park. But right from the get-go, before we first started talking about doing a food cart pod there, I was pushing for actual bathrooms because we would be the only light rail stop on the line, on the entire system that had a bathroom.
Yeah, and that's just, yeah.
I think matters, if you're commuting, it's, you can be on a train depending on where you're coming from for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So, I think that's worth exploring more. And particularly since we're opening up the sewer and the street anyway.
Yeah.
It's going to be don't want to do that twice.
Yeah, that's why, wanted to bring it up as something to discuss because we're going to be excavating anyway. That'd be the time to do it.
I had a question for you about, have you done any sort of just pricing about the heating, the potential for heating?
No, I haven't really. We just got the canopy up, and so, the fact that the structure would support it opens up that new opportunity. So I haven't got any. I've been kind of focusing on the sewer because that's like a mandated thing that we have to do, and the heat is, a wish we had kind of thing. But I haven't got specific costs on that yet.
Well, and another thing that's low cost, but nice in the summertime when we get the heat waves is those mister things.
Yeah, we got some misters last year and put them up alongside.
Yeah, they do that at the farmer's market, and it's very popular.
Yeah, one of those 100-degree days or 100-degree plus days, it makes a huge difference.
Well, I've been really excited to see how just having the high school finally completed, that almost instantly bumped the traffic over at the food cart lot. And I know that sometimes there are some consequences with that as well, but I think overall, I was excited to see that there's the bounce back of just people being in the area again was so rapid.
Yeah.
And, misters and heaters can bring more people too, but it was just exciting to see that the community still was more than ready to return, even without extra fancy, really nice amenities that we probably should have.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, it is really nice. I think a lot of people are, who are really ready to have normal habits again. So.
Yeah.
And will the ice cream be back this year?
I know.
He hasn't committed, but.
That one spot, it would be a non-compete. Nobody else has ice cream.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, that other cart that the Ruby Jewel that we had last summer, they didn't produce anything, so it was easy because they didn't need the same utility, hookups as the other carts. So, and it was a nice, colorful, fun-looking little bus they had, so it was perfect for that place.
Not so much a question, but an observation. Thanks for letting us know. I think that, it's more of a comment for, I guess, the rest of us. It struck me just the desperation that you must have to want to have the only shelter available to you is a porta potty. And I don't have very many other comments beyond that, other than just that I wanted to make sure that was acknowledged. And as we have discussions about whether it's appropriate for a church to open their doors overnight, let's consider that the options are toilets instead. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Well, does anybody else have any questions or comments?
No, thank you.
I think it continues to be a very popular. Yes, people love it. I look forward to seeing what we can do to continue to make it better and better all the time.
Yeah, like I said, I appreciate the city's support in all ways. And, we have many of our original vendors and, we're in our 5th year now. So, we've come a long way and making improvements as we go. And, as you say, I think it's popular on both, the vendors like the opportunity and the community likes it. And hopefully we can get back to having some events this year and things. So, yeah.
Go on some of these. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next item this evening is Volunteer of the Year Award selection. It's always really hard
It's wonderful and difficult time of the year.
Jason, how are you? Good, how are you? Actually in person.
Yeah, all of it. Second person, in person, so just second, but it's okay. Good evening. I feel like I was just talking to everybody about the Volunteer of the Year of 2020, but here we are in 2020, talking about 2021. I think before I start, I have to share my PowerPoint with Zoom. Is that correct? Thanks. What's that? Oh. Sorry. Here. This is my first hybrid meeting, so.
You're our first presenter, so.
I am the first of something then. Thank you, sir.
And then you gotta go here and click that.
Okay.
Boom. Now
Got
we're
it.
there.
Okay.
You can minimize that chat thing too.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Just want to make sure everybody at home can see what I'm going to talk about. So, all right. Volunteer of the Year. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of background about the Volunteer of the Year since we started it, and then kind of talk about the process. Scott has some ballots over there. He's going to distribute to everybody, and then we will announce the winner tonight. But I'll come back to you in a month or so to actually invite that person in to thank them, and then we'll talk a little bit more about other ways of thanking them as well. So we've been doing the Volunteer of the Year now since 2012. Here's all the past winners. Hamid Shabata Bennett was last year's winner. As everybody knows, we haven't really appropriately thanked folks since before the pandemic with our volunteer dinner. We'll talk a little bit more about that and how we're going to try to correct that. So the nomination process for this year began on December 14th and ended on February 14th. This year we received 9 nominations. It was down a little bit this year, and I think last year was as well. I probably would, there's probably a lot of reasons for that. The pandemic probably hasn't helped. I think volunteering has been more difficult. A lot of volunteer opportunities have been canceled, the last couple of years that we would normally see. So I think that played a little bit of a part into it. So our 9 nominations are there. There is one nomination that includes two people. As you know, we have chosen 2 people in the past, but every other year we've only chosen 1. I guess I can read them. So this year we're looking, the nominations came from Zach Perry, Brandy and Tom Johnson, Ray Bryan, Stephanie Hollingshead, Susanna Pye, Linda Carr, Samantha Swindler, Terry Geyer Brindell, I hope I got that right, and Neil Hankerson. All right, I'm just going to go over a little bit about the criteria. So the criteria for choosing the winner is anyone who resides in Milwaukie or members of a nonprofit or business that serves the Milwaukie community. Longevity of service to the community is always a criteria that we've looked at. If you look at a lot of our past winners definitely have been volunteering for a very long time with the city and elsewhere. Some contribution to volunteer service in 2021 within the total volunteer effort as well. So, something, obviously volunteering in this past year. Service within the city limits of Milwaukie. Many of our volunteers volunteer in a variety of ways, but at least part of that should be in the city in some way. And then some contribution to a city-related activity, like a board, commission, or an NDA. Not necessarily a requirement, but it's definitely a criteria that council's considered in the past. The way that we thank the winners typically is we thank them here at a council meeting typically. We recognize them at our annual volunteer dinner, which all of our board and commission members, NDA members, ad hoc committees that we may have had that have been meeting are invited to that dinner. We haven't had the dinner since 2019, but we really are going to hope to have it this year. So this year's dinner, would you
Promise?
That's a tough one. I wish I could say promise. I think we're looking at having it potentially outside in the early part of the summer. But we'll be working with council on that a little bit more in terms of finding the right date. But we will hope to. It's going to be a longer speaking engagement, I think, because we have to thank a total of, I guess, since we had 2 people win one year, we're going to be thanking 4 people. So there'll be a lot of speeches that will need to be made. So we'll have to keep that in mind. So we'll thank them at that. Hopefully, we release a press release so that folks know. Usually it's picked up by local media. It seems like each year. We'll feature in the pilot newsletter, some social media posts, the volunteer plaque that's in the lobby of City Hall. They'll be added to that, and just being the volunteer of the year, something that I think people really do appreciate, and they can always hang their hat on. And I know when I run into a past winner, I always, if we're doing something else, I always say, did you know that this was also a volunteer of the year of 2018? It's a very important thing to recognize over time as well. So it's really, as usual, I don't have a lot to talk about. Everybody, I think, on council has received the nominations and hopefully had a chance to dive into them a little bit. Are there any questions or comments about sort of criteria or anything that, I provided to you prior to this? Anything?
I'll just say that when I saw the announcement go up for taking nominations, I felt like, we did so, we were shut down so much that there's not going to be people with much activity in 2021, and I was wrong. There were lots of people with lots of good contributions to the community in 2021, even though we were, limited in what some of the things we were doing. So that was great to see.
Yeah, it's like I usually have a ton of photos of people volunteering, and I look back and I just don't have that many photos.
Well, Hamid has them for the Parks District, but yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we've ever had a business person nominated before. I don't remember seeing that before. But he's served on a lot of committees over the years. So
yeah.
I thought it was especially fitting that you had the last day be February 14th.
Oh, Valentine's.
For submissions. Yeah, because, especially reading through all of the nominations, it is such a love letter to the community. The time that these people put in, the time that people who do the nominations of these people put in to writing those nominations, it's really touching. I always love reading these because I always learn something about Milwaukee's history, and I always am just really touched that there are so many people who give their time and their energy to making this community work and be fun and thoughtful and all the things that it is, and that there are also people who see that work happening and want to honor those folks for the work they put in. So thank you to everyone who's on this list, who put in a nomination, all of the above. It's really sweet. It is a love letter.
If there's no more questions, we can hand out the ballots if you want to just get right to it. I do have extras in case of a tie.
We've had to go 2 or 3 rounds.
We should go to star voting or ranked choice voting or something so that solve that problem.
Yes. You ready?
Yeah.
It's got all fancy this year. This is very fancy.
That's Jordan Enlaw's work. I want to give him credit.
There's no geese on it.
Above and beyond.
Where's the geese?
It's hidden, actually.
Okay.
Very small.
Where's the secret envelope?
I know. The phone. Why isn't Scott wearing anything with sequins on it?
Bow tie.
Oh,
Again, a very tough list.
Yeah.
Everyone is very deserving. We'll definitely be sure to include everyone in the pilot and elsewhere as well. So making sure that everybody's connected somewhere. So I think the hardest part each year for me is always trying to convince folks that if you've nominated someone in the past, please nominate them again because, there's only one winner and it takes time sometimes, there's a lot of really good candidates. So
After the first round of balloting, I can report that Zach Perry received 1 vote, Neil Hankerson received 1 vote, Susanna Pye received 1 vote, and Tom and Brandy Johnson received 2 votes.
maybe not every analyst.
Not an unanimous vote, so we're gonna keep going. We're going at the top. Oop, that we're gonna-
that's everybody on the list.
Well, this isn't happened in the past, I don't think.
Oh,
Has it?
No, we've had to go
We've had
more than one round, but I don't know.
Okay.
It's always been tough.
we've had 2-3 splits, I think.
I'm glad I brought 3 rounds of. I knew that
We're limiting it now just vote for the
Vote getters.
who got votes. Yeah,
before they got votes.
is that Johnson, Perry, Hankerson, and Pye?
Johnson, Hankerson, Perry, and Pye.
Not any easier to say.
I know. That didn't know that.
What do we do if we need a round 4?
Need around 4.
I'll just have them
Create some
on the
balance.
back of the ballot, just by the name.
Thank you, Scott, for your hard work.
Okay, at the end of round 2, we have 3 for Tom and Brandy Johnson, 1 for Zach Perry, and 1 for Neil Hankerson.
We have a winner.
Yeah, that's a majority, I think.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tom and Brandy Johnson.
Tom and Brandy Johnson. Who have been nominated in the past as well.
It's a wonderful thing that they do. It really is.
Yes, for sure. So I will definitely reach out to them tomorrow. They may be watching, you never know. And then we'll be in touch in terms of trying to figure out a date for the dinner, and then we'll go from there. Yeah. Any other questions or? Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Scott, would you like me to stop sharing?
Yep.
All right.
I guess if we have 3 years worth of nominees and selecting these 3 years worth of people who've been on and off of NDAs and
That's gonna be a big
committees, that's gonna be a big group.
Yes, that's true. We'll make it work. Thank you.
And our last item for the work session is the housing question. Planning manager, Laura White.
You're real.
I am. I'm so excited to be here tonight, you all. It's so nice to actually see your faces in person. Yay. Oh, so glad. I feel like I've been here a long time. I feel like I've just been looking at you in this little tiny box for a year and a half. So it's nice to see you in person. It's great. Thank you.
I'll stop referring to you as Max Kedrumet.
As what?
Max Kedrumet.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to be here. So tonight we're going to talk about the Housing Capacity Technical Committee. Let's see. I used this before. So we got to talk a little bit about what that committee is going to do. So as you all know, we've got the housing capacity analysis that's coming up, along with the housing production strategy that's coming up. That's something that's required by the state. We have to do an assessment of our current and future demand for housing across a lot of different things, looking at prices, rent levels, locations, housing types, and densities. And what we have to do is we have to take a look at those things compared to the 20-year supply of residential land that we have, buildable land. And here in Milwaukie, it's a little different because we don't have a lot of land to develop residentially. We don't have greenfield development or anything like that, so we need to do a lot of infill development. And so if we decide, if the residential, after doing the BLI, the buildable lands inventory, and it looks like we don't have the amount of land that we need to accommodate the housing that we need, then we have to come up with a strategy for doing so. And we still now knew, it used to be just that you had to come up with a strategy, but now things have changed with House Bill 2003, and every city has to come up with a housing production strategy that kind of gets at all of these things that were identified in housing needs analysis / housing capacity analysis, but that we didn't really have to have any hard conversations about because there wasn't any way of tracking that. So House Bill 2003 is requiring cities to do that. And so fortunately, as you all know, we already have the Milwaukie Affordable Housing Strategy, which has done a lot of the work for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to be taking the housing capacity analysis, taking the affordable housing strategy, and then we're going to turn it into a housing production strategy. And then what we need to do is we need to, we'll do that with a group of folks. So what we wanted to do is we put together this outline of different kinds of people that we were thinking about regionally. So we need some people from the state expert, people are regional experts, and then we need the Milwaukie experts, right? So we put together, and it's really a technical analysis that we have to do. It's kind of prescriptive, at least in the housing capacity analysis portion of it. And then the housing production strategy, we get a little bit more options. Like they've presented a lot of different ideas that we can look at and decide what we want to do as a community. And so we thought that putting together this group of folks to help us do that would be super useful. So you can see all of the different folks from technical, really technical people, all the way down to looking at having 3 folks from our Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee / Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee, 3 folks from that, and then 1 person from all of these other categories. 1 person could serve 2 categories. So you could have a renter that was also on the CFIC or the CPAC. So we may get 12 members, we may not have a full 12 members. And then also what we plan to do is when we get into like little subject areas where we want to kind of do a deep dive, we like to have smaller groups of folks come together based on local expertise. And so those will be kind of ad hoc committees that will bring back information to this technical committee. So I don't know if you have any questions about the makeup that we're proposing tonight. Seems like a rational, yeah. Okay, cool.
Looks really good.
Great, good. I'm excited about this group. I think it's going to be a really interesting process. And I think
Metro and DCLD, I mean, they will give people to cities to do this.
I do think they will. And I think a big change. So one thing that's changed is, so there's been the regional housing needs analysis project that was done, which hasn't been adopted, right? So they're still working through what that might look like and what might be coming. But I think that in the initial part of the project, Metro wasn't as involved. So they're pulling in Metro now because that has a lot to do with the allocation for projections, population projections that we get out of Metro scope. So I think it'll be really useful to have Metro at the table at our conversation, because we're kind of going through this process at a kind of a unique time in the whole larger process, so that whatever they can learn from us as much as we can learn from them. So our process can inform their process. At least that's what I would hope. So that's a very long answer to yes, I think they'll be involved. So that is my goal, to reach out to them. And then Eco Northwest, just so you know, this is the consultant that we hired, and they have been really involved with the state in doing the housing production strategy work and what that's going to look like. They're also at the table looking at the regional housing analysis. So I feel like we've got some really great expertise on that team. And so they know what the challenges are between what it's like to do a housing capacity analysis based on how we've been doing it, and then what those gaps are that we haven't been capturing in our housing needs analysis, housing capacity analysis, because as you all are probably aware, we've just been undercounting need for a very long time. And so that's why they're trying to make some changes. So I think ours won't be a perfect process, because we won't have that new structure in place to kind of capture all of those folks. That's why we're bringing all of these different people to the table, so that we can have a larger conversation. So it's not just a technical analysis, that it goes beyond the technical part. So we get some of that qualitative, so we can do a better job than we've been doing with these analysis, I think, in the past. So they're shifting. And Eco Northwest has been critical to all that work. So it's great to have them on the team. And so just quickly, there should be a draft of the HCA in October of this year. And then we'll be with a draft in March of 2023 of the housing production strategy. And then we're done by 2023. So this is where we get to have who wants to volunteer to be on the committee. So here's your commitment level. I think right now we're looking at approximately 9 meetings over 15 months. So I thought it would be really great to have somebody, obviously, from the council to sit in on that. So I will open it up to the floor to have you all discuss or have a volunteer. I don't know how you want to handle it.
Questions or
yes, please.
A couple thoughts first.
Yeah.
Do we now have a mechanism to actually get current rents from landlords?
I don't know that we can get all, you can do kind of an imperfect analysis of that, I think, but I don't think that we can actually get all of the rents, because it's more private information, but I think we can do some best guessing.
Yeah, that's what we did on the MHAs too, and it was...
Yeah, it's not perfect.
It's not. I mean, the results proved it out too. I felt like it didn't quantify the lower end as heavily as reality is.
Right.
So we weren't getting the true rents and then matched with the spectrum of incomes.
Right. No, and I think that that's probably still going to be the case, but I do hope that having those right people at that table, at that conversation, that can help inform that. Maybe it's not going to be real data, but at least it'll be some kind of qualitative, maybe not quantitative, but qualitative information that we might have.
Yeah, and I'll just say, from being at the MPAC table and talking about some of this, I would say that Metro and Eco Northwest both really recognize the need to figure out how to get those numbers to be more accurate. So yeah. It's a really good point to bring up. But I think they are thinking about it.
You would think that those numbers could be gathered as an aggregate without details about whose apartment building which is, just aggregate by zip code or aggregate by something, voting precinct, or I don't know. It's just something so that we have real data instead of looking on Zillow or
right.
list, or I don't know where they're even looking up renting prices.
And as you know, from sitting on the rulemaking committee for HB 2003, I will say that looking beyond your boundaries is almost more important than getting data like what you're talking about. Because historically, we've always looked within our own borders, and we've only been required to look within our own borders, which is by its nature based on the past and the exclusionary practices and the wrong practices from the past, and perpetuating that moving forward. And so I agree, having the best data that we can get from Eco Northwest and Metro, which is the best data that we can get, but also with that scope and that understanding. And that's also why HB 2003 requires that we have more robust conversations than we did at MOS. And I think that's another really key difference in our requirements and our applications under this law, is that we have to have conversations with communities that we've never had in the past.
The other piece that I want to at least get into the thinking is that the calculations that we've always used for in-migration have always fallen short of the reality by the time I got there. Keep in mind, climate change is going to continue to get worse. In-migration is going to continue to get heavier. So however that can be worked into the calculations, it's the reality of what you're going to face. So.
Yeah. And I think that that'll be something that moving forward when Metroscope is when Metro is looking at how they're running the numbers for Metroscope, that's a really important trigger that I don't think that or lever that I don't think they've figured out yet, but there have been conversations at a regional level about how to address that more thoroughly. It's tricky because I don't think there's a magic number that they just know exactly which way to, move the lever. So that's something that we can, though, take into account. And I think one of the biggest things, too, is that all of our need has been projected on our past need, whereas Milwaukee has grown at a very, very slow rate over the years. But we're seeing a lot of change in Milwaukee. So to use that 1% is just erroneous. It's not going to tell us what we need to know.
Utterly irrelevant.
Yeah, it is.
Utterly irrelevant.
Yeah, so we really do have to think about that with all of the different things that are happening and the different kinds of folks that might be coming to Milwaukee or might want to come to Milwaukee.
But can't.
They can't, exactly. Trying to provide those housing opportunities for those folks.
Thank you for that. I just personally would love to be on this committee because I was on the MHAS and I found it both fascinating and really gratifying. However, I will not be here for the entire term of this, so it should not be me. It should be somebody who's going to be able to do it for the whole 16 months.
I know that Councillor Belkner has a very heavy schedule, but if you would have the capacity, you are certainly the person I think of as being our housing expert. So I would nominate you. Thank you.
Would you care to be my alternate if I need to take
that? Sure. Yes, I'll try.
And I will do my best to absolutely accept it. I would be, yes.
I mean, I would love further discussion about me as an alternate as well. I'm not trying to on it or anything. Please.
No, I think Councillor Belkner makes perfect. All her experience on the rulemaking and everything else. So. And you with the.
I'll be your alternate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Win-win.
All right, great. Thanks. Well, I'm so excited to have you because you have been so involved with all this. So you're going to be a real help asset to our
I'm
team.
excited.
So I'm excited about it.
Talk with all these people you're going to convene. I think that's a really exciting group. And
yeah.
People are all learn so much from them. So that's very exciting.
Definitely.
But will the public be allowed to attend?
They're open meetings, of course. Of course. All right. Well, I guess that's it for me. Thank you so much, you all. It was nice to see you. I'll see you in like an hour, but I'll be back.
Thank you.
Well, that closes out our work session for this evening. Lots of time to spare. Do anybody want to, since we have a little bit of time, talk a little bit about Food Truck Pod and ideas and possibilities, or does that make staff very nervous?
I'm nervous all the time. It's fine.
That's your job to be nervous?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
I want to chat about it.
Glad to facilitate your
my anxiety. Excellent. Happy to chat. What are you thinking, Mayor?
Well, I think, if we're going to be in the ground in that pod, digging it up, certainly putting an electrical service to the covered area makes sense at that moment, right? And I would love to get a bid on what it would cost us to put two actual bathrooms with flush toilets, sink to be outside, shared sink, you know. But it's something that's bothered me since I lived in New York City. And when you're in New York City and you're walking around doing things all day, going to meetings, whatever it is, you know what you do when you have to go to the bathroom? You have to go get something to eat, you know, or go to a bar, order a drink. It's crazy. And it shouldn't be like that more. Portland has attempted to solve it. New York actually has attempted to solve it at this point too. They're doing the same kind of porta potty things. But I think it would take our food cart pod to the next level. As strange as that sounds, it would take our transit station to the next level. So I would like to know what it would cost to put that in while we're tearing up all that ground and going into the sewer and all that stuff.
The only question I have about that is if we were to go down that route, just making sure that we go down at once, because I think, the last time we had a conversation about the food cart pods, I don't think we were talking about a 3-year lease, but maybe we were, but we also have always recognized that was a temporary use of the space. And I'm not saying that it won't always be, I would love to see that space continue to be an entry, a way that folks can, start a business without the brick and mortar cost of starting a business. But maybe it doesn't necessarily involve, trucks. Maybe it's, maybe it can be a kitchen space and be, shared bathroom and all of those things that, all the amenities that we're talking about putting onto this place that currently is gravel and ugly tent. It's great, but it's not it's not a permanent structure, And so if we do that, I don't want to tear up the ground more than once. If we don't have to, I'd love to see us go in there and if we're going to build something, maybe it's more focused on the station, and then the food cart use is sort of
Well, and there's lots of ways. It doesn't even have to be a permanent, brick and mortar literally structure. There's I've seen these units that are built like a trailer, but they're just it's 2 bathrooms. They're really, really nice bathrooms. And they're plumbed. Yeah. Right? So they can be moved. So then 10 years, if there's an opportunity to build Milwaukie, or whatever, we can do that. We haven't built I'm pulling this out of the bathrooms in the park. What were they going to cost?
100.
No, it was way more than that because it was.
Oh, well, I don't know. I'm looking at Kelly to see if she knows.
Do you remember, Kelly? It was ridiculous. It was like $250,000. You could build a house for what you're talking about building the bathroom. So I have to assume it could be cheaper than that, but these trailer things definitely would be cheaper than that, right? But it would be not porta potties. It would be, much better facility.
So if we're going to bring a bid forward, which we can, the actual construction is less of a concern than the ongoing maintenance for the facility. So right now, these are maintained by the porta potty company. They come over, they empty them. They're not maintained under a contract. And we don't actually have any facilities people who maintain these types of facilities. So because we don't have a purchase permit, honestly. So it's just something else to keep in mind is even if we do put them in the ground, we don't have that broader cost, honestly.
Right, but if he's paying to have porta potty service, undoubtedly there's a service out there that could come however often, clean the bathrooms and place the tub. I just have to think that there's some small.
Well, whoever, yeah.
Well, right now the people who do it are in security. So
if you rent that trailer, I guess that's the question. If you buy it, then maybe it doesn't come with a service. If you rent it, it probably comes with a service.
Yeah, but they're not cheap to rent.
Oh, yeah.
You'd spend a lot in 5 years. You'd have been able to buy it 4 times over.
I would not be very keen on the idea of building something there because I do see that redeveloping in 3 to 5 years. And I do want to remind people who maybe don't know this, that, I mean, the original plan was for a station building that was oriented to the tracks and had a coffee shop. And what went in the building was kind of always nebulous, but I mean, it was a station building which would, have bathrooms and have, a coffee shop right there on the facing out to the platform. So I wouldn't be keen on doing anything permanent, but if there's something we can do by way of a trailer or whatever, I think it's worth exploring. I do think, as Richard pointed out, I mean, it's going to be the same problem and maybe even more of a problem with the leaving it unlocked at night, needing to leave it unlocked at night so that you don't have, more vandalism. And I know NCPRD has had a problem with that in a couple of parks. So, I mean, there are definitely pros and cons.
So, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that that food cart pod is right next to a TriMet-owned facility. It's true that the train operators have a break room at the end of the line that they can use. But we're about to move out of this city hall. Our bathroom is used all the time by all of the bus drivers. So I think TriMet is at a point where maybe they have a vested interest in having a conversation with the city about what we might be able to come up with that would suit the needs of those bus drivers. It's not on site the way this is for the bus mall, but they're gonna want something at some point here, and it's a lot closer. They can't go to the Orange Line, and certainly.
Maybe they would buy some lunch or something too.
Well, that was going to be that we could maybe partner with TriMet on this. Something they would be wanting to do there. They're looking at ways to sort of bring transit back. Yeah. Had a hard couple of years too. So
yeah. So what I hear from council is let's think about ways to take advantage of any cuts in the street. That's one.
And the torn up.
Yes, the construction that occurs, how can we take advantage fully from that? The second part is exploring the public restroom side of it. Those are the kind of the two main concerns I hear right now, which I'm happy to explore with Richard.
I'd like to just jump in one time, which is, this is a lot of staff work. So I also just want to make sure it's clear that we have two people who are working on a number of projects right now. This will replace projects because we do not have other people who can come into the room. So Joe and Mandy are the two people who do our construction work. So it will be those two individuals who will be working on this. We can do it. If this is more important, I'm totally in, but I just want to be transparent that these are individuals who are currently working on City Hall, working on Sparrow site, working on Coho, working on the other City Hall. So,
True.
Thanks.
Yes. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think that's an appropriate reality check, especially given that this is a site that we are maintaining in sort of its wonderful use right now. At some point, the use will be different, and that time is quite likely on the horizon that we can see at this point. Yeah. So it may not be the best place to invest a lot of staff time that we don't have in the first place.
Let's say that Joe and I are talking to TriMet in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm happy to bring it up to them. So if they wanted to move forward with something and have a discussion with us about the site, that is an easy add into our conversation. I just can't take on an additional city side staff project unless we get rid of something.
And I can also suggest, just in this constant conversation with Richard and Johnson Group when it comes to this, is we can figure out ways to leverage what he's already doing so it makes sense. I think those are light lifts that don't add tons of staff time, so we can attempt to do those things pretty easily and quickly.
Right. I mean, particularly if what we're getting is something that's a pre-made thing that gets delivered, that's hopefully a few hours of learning conversation to find out what's available out there, what it costs.
Yeah. I'm saying it's similar to the city manager. I think we can leverage Richard to actually, he's already doing a lot of the research right now, so we can possibly make him kind of help do the.
If he wants to bring us something, that's fine. I just, these projects get out of hand. So I'm making a commitment that Joe's time is committed, unless we're talking to TriMet for a quick conversation or he's calling Richard, I probably would recommend that we give up the other projects we're working on. You all get to make that decision. We do have the retreat coming up this weekend if you want to think about it and have a different take on one of the projects we're doing. But Joe sent me his list of projects yesterday or last week. It's very long. I want him to be successful here, and that means that I need to protect his time.
So hopefully those lists will be broken out by department and by something so that when these conversations occur, we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I think that I've had the conversations with most of you at this point about the list that I sent around. Just generally right now, our staff is working on some pretty significant projects across the board. But all those are things you all get to direct. So if there's a project that we're working on that isn't the priority of the council, we can have a discussion about removing the project. I will also say that there are a couple of things where we're halfway down the road. I would recommend we not stop doing some of those things, but we can talk about that at any time.
Thanks. Does anybody else have anything else before we take a break? All right. So we will return at 6 o'clock for regular meeting.